welcome to another episode of October Surprise, a podcast created for citizens by citizens in Pennsylvania's new 16th Congressional District. I'm Jim Roddy, a lifelong resident of Northwest Pennsylvania, and your host for today's podcast. Before we give background on our podcast and get to today's interview, we've been sharing the concept of October Surprise on social media and receiving great feedback, great comments. The idea is really resonating with our community here in Northwest PA. So thanks for the feedback. We really appreciate that. For those who aren't familiar with our podcast, here's a little bit of background. October Surprise features a series of interviews designed to educate listeners in Erie, Crawford, Mercer, Lawrence, and Butler Counties on key issues that face both our district and our two congressional candidates, incumbent Mike Kelly and challenger Ron DiNicola. We also discuss ethical leadership, which unfortunately is in rare supply in Washington, D.C. in 2018. We'll do a lot of talking today and throughout the month of October on this podcast, but our ultimate goal is action. For democracy to work, you have to participate. We can't be bystanders. So at a minimum, that means being an informed voter. You can help by sharing episodes of October Surprise with your family and at least one or two friends. Those on-the-fence voters who sometimes vote in an election, hardly ever vote in a midterm, we're trying to convince them to have their voice heard. The ultimate action is to vote on Election Day. Let's surprise the special interest groups, the political action committees, and the big money when we take back our district on Tuesday, November 6th, and once again, put people first. Finally, I'm not a political veteran or a campaign strategist. I don't have all the answers. But together, we're going to learn what's happening in our district by talking with elected officials, grassroots leaders, and extraordinary citizens from PA 16 in each episode. Our special guest today is Jessica Yochim Taylor. She's a native of Waterford and the owner of the Menagerie Studio in Erie, a digital media studio that was launched in 2013, and it's spelled capital M-E-N-A-J, capital E-R-I-E. I like what she's doing there. Among her projects are creating videos to reveal the hidden gems in Northwest Pennsylvania and steering a marketing campaign to help curtail the opioid crisis in our community. Jessica has been recognized by the Erie Reader as a member of their 40 Under 40 list, and she's only 28, so she has a chance to make that list for at least another decade. Jessica, thanks for your time today. Welcome to October Surprise.
Thanks for having me.
So I want to talk about both of the marketing campaigns that I referenced, and let's tackle the toughest one first, so the one about the opioid crisis in Erie. So for that project, you and a team of folks met with state and local officials, addicts in recovery, parents whose kids are recovering addicts, family members who lost loved ones, and healthcare professionals. Really saw the entire spectrum. What did you hear and what did you learn? What can you share with us?
So the program was with the Jefferson Educational Society. It was the Civic Leadership Academy, and our topic, as you mentioned, was the opioid crisis, and we decided to do a video series to help spread education and awareness. As far as, meeting with state and local officials, it was really a mixed bag of responses, and a lot of people had their own personal stories as far as what they felt could help the opioid crisis, but also what caused it. So I felt like really the conversation was just getting started, and people are just now really starting to realize that we really need to put this in the forefront and the focus of some of our policies that we're making.
And so you said some people are just starting to realize it. What are some of the things that you learned from those folks who are maybe deeper into this, who have been more experienced and have been seeing this for a longer time, as opposed to, people are just getting around to understanding how deep this crisis is?
Well, I think that, addiction has, it's a tale as old as time, but the current state that we're in is a state of emergency regarding addiction, and it really is affecting, almost every person you can talk to has a personal connection towards it. So I think that rather than just there's that guy on the street, he's probably a drug addict. Now it's my son or my daughter is one of those addicts, or my daughter's friend died of an overdose or something like that. It's a lot more closer to home these days.
Yeah, and I can say that for sure. I mean, I've never been somebody to use drugs. I hear these stories of, people drinking in high school. I didn't even drink in high school. I didn't drink in college. Stayed away from it. But this year I got a personal connection with it because on April 2nd, my 32-year-old brother overdosed and passed away.
I'm sorry to hear that.
Thank you. He had I haven't talked about this publicly, but, he for years had a drug addiction, and then it was just a combination of, all the drugs in his system, and he overdosed. And so talking to the funeral director, he was telling us about his conversations with the coroner and other folks in our community, and just the range of people, it's almost like, it seems like it's nearly an everyday thing. I mean, there are people overdosing multiple times, and it just really, really hits hard. I mean, there's some things that are called crises that are maybe overhyped, but this isn't an overhyped crisis in our community. Is that how you feel about it after having an up-close look at it?
No, I mean, absolutely agree with that. I've lost friends. I personally had never gone down that road, but I can certainly empathize with people that have. There are several roads that lead to addiction, and some of which are, easy. Somebody might get hurt or they break an arm or something like that. Maybe they're on the track team in high school, and then they get prescribed painkillers. And the thing is, some people have a switch in their brains genetically in which, they try that one time and they're hooked. I mean, other people, can, have their wisdom teeth out and take pain meds and get off it easier. But for other people, they're finding that genetically, that it exists where they try it one time, and then it's very, very difficult for them to get off of those.
Right, and my brother was in and out of jail, so he'd go to jail, and I know jails have some drugs, but he would go through treatment programs, but then back out on the street, back with the same group of people or a similar group of people. It just seems like there's no way out, but that's like kind of a hopeless conversation there. But what have you seen? What's your perspective? What can be done to at least slow down this epidemic and hopefully get to the point where we can stop it? Like, what can we as citizens do about something that seems so out of our control?
Well, it's a difficult question because there really isn't one solid answer, at least that anybody has found. I think it's a combination of things because there are different types of addicts and people that become addicted for different reasons. Mm-hmm. So it really is going to be a combination, but I think that the number one thing that needs to be focused on is mental health, because a lot of addicts have some sort of trauma or mental health issue that isn't dealt with, and then self-medication becomes a way to deal with that. Everything from, something that happens in childhood to maybe even like bullying or just, growing up in general can be hard, or poverty. All of those things can set somebody up for addiction.
Right, there's some sort of pain that's going on. Like you said, it could have started with a broken arm, but it could be some things from a mental, psychological, emotional standpoint, and that's how they cope with it.
Exactly.
So, we're talking about the background of the political campaign, the congressional election. So Mike Kelly, the incumbent, so he's hosted teletown halls about opioids, and he's always promoting how he sponsored a bill to block synthetic opioid shipments in the United States. So what are your thoughts on his job performance in this area? Is he doing enough? Is he really getting to the heart of the problem? Is he digging in and actually making progress? Is it more a show thing that politicians tend to do?
Well, it's hard to say what really motivates an individual, especially in politics. I think doing something is better than nothing, because at least you're starting to stir the pot and get these conversations going. The sad thing is there is interest in pharmaceutical companies to, sell drugs, essentially. So it's hard to say, if he's doing the right thing or not, and I'm not sure exactly, what to say.
Okay, but you bring up the whole background from a pharmaceutical standpoint, and so he gets a lot of money from special interest groups. Him and a lot of other politicians do. I mean, he's got tens of thousands of dollars from insurance lobbyists, healthcare lobbyists, other special interest groups. He's got like $1.1 million from political action committees to fund his campaign. And the thing that blew me away, I mean, you're in the media and marketing business. Opioid makers reportedly spent almost $900 million on lobbyists and political contributions between 2006 and 2015. And that's a staggering amount of money to push their drugs. I mean, you're in the marketing world. Just think of what you could do, how much influence you could have with, $900 million, pushing folks in Washington, D.C.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that sadly is, the nature of, our healthcare system right now. And the thing is, I think if any politician were to make an impact and to try and really get to the root of addiction, I think that more time, money needs to be spent on the mental health aspect and less on we do need the recovery because, let's face it, there are an overwhelming amount of addicts right now, but in order for future generations to start bringing these numbers down, we need to get it before it starts. So, and that, I think, is in mental health. And even with addiction, like going to a rehab for, 4 weeks, you're most likely going to relapse. You need to have, an outpatient recovery plan, and you need to have mainly mental health and therapy and all those kinds of resources for you when you get out, because otherwise you're just going to go, like you said, you're going to go back to hanging out with the same friends, the same habits, and most likely you're just going to end up using again.
And is that kind of where you see that government's role could be? Because oftentimes the folks who have these addiction issues, they let everything else in their life go, and so they don't have money, and they're oftentimes stealing to fund their habits. So it's not like you can tell somebody, well, just check yourself into this clinic and pay for it, or why don't you use your health insurance for it? Is that kind of where you see where the government can come in terms of funding these recovery programs or giving everybody access to health care so they would be able to have treatment and not bankrupt families to solve this problem? They shouldn't have a choice, one or the other. They should get the treatment. Is that kind of what you're saying?
Yeah, I do agree with that. But like I said, I do think that more focus needs to be set on the mental health side. And I also think that there should be other alternatives for pain management and pain treatment. Yeah. And, for example, marijuana is one. I'm not one to say, you should be just switching out a vice or something like that. However, that vice won't kill you, and that vice won't leave you on the street, to die. Right. So, I think that there are other avenues that the government should explore, but I think that the big money interests are what is hindering those pursuits.
For sure. It just gets in the way. I mean, I've been in business for a few decades. You're a small business owner, and money drives a lot of things, no doubt about it. Okay, well, let's talk about the pro-Erie marketing that you've done. I mean, we've all heard about Dreary Erie. Unfortunately, without anybody, pushing that marketing message, it seems to get, propagated from person to person. Can you talk about, Jessica, what message are you communicating about our community, and what aspects of it are you showcasing to make that point and talk about the positive aspects of Erie and all of PA16?
Well, I think Erie is, a good example of a microcosm of the United States as a whole. Like, a lot of the issues that we are facing here are, our whole country is facing on a national scale, including the, opioid crisis. Mm-hmm. I think that living in Erie is actually in a lot of ways, at least in my experience, has been a very positive experience opposed to living in one of the other big cities where the cost of living is very high, the competition for jobs is even higher. And a lot of people think, hey, there's no jobs, left in Erie, GE's moving out, blah, blah, blah. But that's why, we started a business. And I've seen this big push within the last 5 years of people starting businesses and having success with those businesses because there's a lot of incentives in Erie in particular to start businesses, whether there's tax incentives, there's a growing community of entrepreneurs, there's a lot of support in different organizations who their sole purpose is to help people start businesses. So, I'm from here. I grew up here. And, I went away for college. I even lived in L.A. for, a few months before deciding to come back here to start my business. And I really feel like I made the right choice because otherwise I feel like I would just be lost somewhere else. And here there's the support in the community to help make a living out of what I love to do.
So if you can talk about that support. I'm no longer a young entrepreneur. I actually had my own sports magazine from age 23 to 28 before I went to work for somebody else. So I'm no longer young and no longer an entrepreneur. And I'm sure some of the folks listening to this podcast don't fit into either of those categories. Can you talk about, you said that there's more of a entrepreneurial community in Erie. Can you give us a little bit more insight into that, what that looks like?
Sure. So our company is located in the Renaissance Center, which is the tallest building in downtown Erie, and it's located on 10th and State. And within this building, there are dozens of small businesses that have started up within the last 5 years. One includes a co-working space called Radius Co-work, which is on the 9th floor here, and that is actually the epicenter of this whole community. And a lot of people assume, hey, you got to be young to be a part of this community, but that's not true at all. There are people of all different ages that are a part of Radius. And the purpose of Radius is, say you have an idea for a business or you're working out of your house on your startup idea, but you can't afford office space yet. Well, Radius kind of works in a way like a gym membership where, you pay month to month, and you can get a desk, and you're a part of the network and the community, and you can go there to work every day and be around other people who are in similar situations, and it just offers the support and the community that, otherwise you wouldn't have if you were just working out of a home office.
Right. Okay. So you end up having more opportunity for collaboration as opposed to just being in a windowless office and figuring out how to make this thing go. Which, now that I look back on it, that's how I started my entrepreneurial career. There were no sharing opportunities or anything like that. So you decided to go down the path of a digital studio, and then part of what you've done is, as I alluded to, the marketing of Erie. Why did you do that? What motivates you to promote Erie and kind of go against the grain where folks more focus on the abandoned buildings and what used to be as opposed to what it is now and what it could be? What's motivated you to work on that project and to promote Erie?
Well, I've never subscribed to the idea that, that Dreary Erie type of mentality, because my experience growing up here and living here has always been positive. I mean, we have a beautiful city located on, one of the largest freshwater lakes that exists, and all of my friends and family are from here, and so it's hard for me to really, have that pessimistic attitude towards somewhere that I love. But as far as, the other people who might have had experiences which, makes them see this negative side, I feel like you can have that wherever you are. And so it's best to grow and flourish where you're rooted. And so if you don't like where the city is at and what you see, then you need to be a part of the positive change rather than reinforce the negative change, because honestly, moving into a different city or a different place, you're gonna, wherever you go, there you are. So it's not going to solve the problems and the conflicts that you have internally. I feel like it's everyone's individual responsibility to care for the people and the environment that is immediately around them, whether it's your house, your business, your family, even just, the community of other people that you might not know personally, but you still interact with on a daily basis. If everybody takes care of their own, then, to me, that the world would just be a better place.
Yeah, what you're talking about reminds me of two aphorisms. One is grow where you're planted, or, blossom where you're planted. It's not that you have to go somewhere else. And then also, successful people bring their own weather with them. And so it doesn't matter what's going on outside or what just happened 10 minutes ago in terms of you've got to bring your own weather with you, and you can be happy and sunny, or you can be cloudy and grouchy. So that's kind of what you're talking about in terms of you can be happy in L.A., or why can't you be happy in Erie, PA as well?
Absolutely.
I think I got soured. Like I said, I'm 48. You're 28, and I still remember going to We Love Erie days and seeing an award ceremony from a boat race that they used to have down there. And Lou Tullio was the mayor handing out awards. I mean, there was We Love Erie all over the place. And the guys who were receiving some award for their boat race, their T-shirts they made up said "We Tolerate Erie." So it's kind of been like a lifelong thing. I mean, that's going back probably to sometime in the early 1980s that people would do that. So let's talk about the youth community, those who were born in the 1980s, if not later. How important is it for young people that you think to really get involved in their community and, first stay in their community? And what can be done to kind of stop that brain drain? What can be done to keep people in Erie outside of some of the things you've mentioned already?
Well, I think, our generation has kind of an interesting hand dealt to them, particularly with, student debt. And so a lot of people that I know who have student debt aren't even able to find jobs that can help even begin to start paying off that debt. And so I feel like we have to get more creative with what we want in life, and I think that more people are starting to realize, that they need to start pursuing their creative passions or what it is that actually interests them and also is more satisfying at the end of the day. And so, as far as in Erie, in communities like Erie, I think getting involved is one of the best ways to feel like you have control over your environment and the city around you. And so, voting is absolutely one of those things. Mm-hmm. In a national election, it's harder to feel like your vote matters, but in a local setting, that it absolutely matters, and everybody should vote because that's where you will actually see change happen, is in your immediate community.
And so you're expressing that opinion to me, when you talk to folks who are your age or a little younger, a little bit older, is that a conversation that you have? Are they energized to vote? Are they like, oh, of course I vote? Or is it like, what's even the point of it? I guess, can you give your perspective on, in your younger community, how they're feeling about politics? And do a lot of them agree with you that you should vote? Or are you in the business of convincing people to get involved politically?
Well, it's hard to say as a generalization, just because the people that I surround myself with absolutely understand and do vote because, we're a part of what we like to say is the new Erie. Mm-hmm. And so we are trying to be a part of the community. And so I can't speak for everybody my age because, I feel like some people, of course, have this mentality of like, oh, my vote doesn't matter, or I don't care, or they're apathetic, or they don't know who the candidates are, so they feel like they can't just, go out and vote. And but I do think that in general, especially after, the 2016 election, more people in general have taken a vested interest in politics and have become self-educated more on what is happening because they're seeing, the effects of that, and I do think that is changing.
Got it. And I'll ask you an unfair question, but you almost can't answer it incorrectly because I'm asking you to look down the road in terms of what do you think Erie and the area could look like in 20 years? Like I said, I was self-employed in the mid-1990s, and I was part of an informal group of like John Mancino from Mancino Academy, still in business, Tom Boyd and Christine Ganos-Boyd from Boyd Chiropractic. They're still in business. I'm still here, working and living in Erie. So, I almost feel like, oh, hey, we actually grew up and we're still, contributing to the community and still working in the community. I guess what are you hoping? Do you think this could be a renaissance? This could be a growth opportunity for Erie? Is that what your hope is? What are you looking at, you think, in your community? What's it going to be like 20 years down the road?
Well, I think sky's the limit, honestly. So it really depends on, where people put their vision and time and energy. I think that, funny enough, we're in the Renaissance Center, my business is, with all these others. So I do think that there is this renaissance, so to speak, happening. I also think that in general there is this push for people to start moving out of these big cities, and one of my good friends, aptly calls them finished cities, because you go there and there's really not much left to contribute as far as making an impact or a change or starting something. So people are starting to seek out areas and places that actually need things, and the best way is to look for somewhere where like a market doesn't exist. For example, filmmaking and videography, and so finding an area where, that either doesn't exist or there's very little of it, is a perfect place to bring that opportunity there and also add to the culture of a place. And I think more people are starting to understand that. And not to mention that we live in a day of technology, so, we're located in Erie, but, we can service clients anywhere because of the Internet. And so we're visible and we have, access to these markets outside of Erie, which to me is like the best case scenario because, we can live here and call this home and have home base, but, the cost of living is affordable enough that, we have a house. We've started investing in rental properties and started cleaning up some of the different neighborhoods. I've seen more and more community volunteer efforts as far as taking care of and cleaning up different areas. I think that this is a really opportune time to invest in Erie and call Erie home.
Yeah, and I like how you put that in terms of don't look in the rearview mirror for what it used to be. Erie is an unfinished, unfinished market, and there's an opportunity for somebody who's got a vision and a work ethic to do things. And I guess if you can just touch on that, you and I don't know each other very well, but I've always felt bad for people labeling millennials, your generation, as a bunch of slackers or not hard workers. You want to take a minute now and defend your generation in terms of, my take is, just like any generation, there are hardworking 20-year-olds, and there are slacking 20-year-olds. Just like today, there are hardworking 50-year-olds and there's slacker 50-year-olds. I guess if you can address that for folks who are like, I don't think these young kids are going to help us out. They're too lazy.
I think that the millennials are some of the hardest working people that I know, and in different ways. Yes, our generation is not going to settle for that, crappy minimum wage job at, McDonald's to just call it a day. But I think that that's okay because it's leaving room for people to decide, okay, well, what is it that actually makes me happy, and what do I want to do that actually will fulfill me for the rest of my life, so that way I can be the best who I can be, and that way, then I can spread that outwards towards the rest of the community. Because, as I mentioned earlier, if you don't take care of yourself and your own first, it might sound selfish, but in all honesty, it's the most selfless thing you can do, because then you're able to, help others and make an impact in the community if you're comfortable in your own skin and what you're doing. And I think, my generation is, really pushing towards that. And I mean, as far as like the community I'm involved in with these young startups, and I guess millennials, I mean, they're honestly the hardest working people that I've ever met in my life.
Yeah, and it's I guess we can keep going down this point, but there's no set work time, necessarily, because like we have that connection. You can be working early in the morning at your kitchen table. You were working late at night, right before you go to bed, and that's, I think, part of the stuff that people don't see. It's not when you punch in and when you punch out. It's being able to put the time in, but it can be at a little different than what most people are used to. Is that how you?
Yeah, they say that entrepreneurs are the only people that are willing to work 80 hours a week to avoid working 40. So, and that's absolutely true. But I mean, at the end of the day, it's energizing, and and I feel like fulfilling. It's exciting, we're fulfilling our creative passions, and but also getting to see how it's changing and growing our city. Mm-hmm. I think it's awesome.
Yeah, there's certainly opportunity. Well, I say this now, but I could say this because I was self-employed. I would always say all that the self-employed is you're unemployed, but you got an idea. And that's,
yep.
That's really what it comes down to, and you're scraping and scratching. So, well, Jessica, thank you so much for your time today and for your efforts in making Erie a Renaissance city and revitalizing it and really motivating the younger generation to get involved in local politics and involved in contributing to the community. So, and thanks for your time today on the podcast.
Well, thanks for having me.
So our podcast today is over, but there's still more that we need to do. As we talked about at the start, and as Jessica alluded to during our conversation, for democracy to work, we can't be bystanders. We have to participate no matter what our age. You can help by sharing this episode of October Surprise with your family and at least one or two of those on-the-fence voters who live in our district, and then by voting on Election Day. Let's surprise the special interest groups, the political action committees, and the big money when we take back our district on Tuesday, November 6th, and once again, put people first. I'm Jim Roddy. Thanks for listening to October Surprise.